Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another video. Today I'm using several Simon Says Stamp products. I've got this new hibiscus frame. I'm also using the Happy Birthday Sentiment die and the birthday balloons stamp set. I'm just using the birthday part of this stamp right here. I'm centering this die on the top, the right, and the left on this Nina Solar White cardstock cut to A2. The stamen comes with a separate die, so I cut that out separately. I'm going to use some Distress Oxide inks. I'm going to use Fossilized Amber. You can see I'm placing it in kind of random spots. And then in between that color, I'm going to add some worn lipstick. And now I'm going to spray this with some water. I'm going to use quite a bit of water. The kind of cardstock I'm using today is Strathmore 90-pound watercolor paper. I'm just going to lay that right down on my mess and just move it in tiny circles, and this will make sure that my colors don't blend too much together. I'm going to carefully lift it up and I'll let it run down a little bit, and then I'm going to dry it with a heat tool. So between each step I'm going to dry it and then drop it back into my watercolor. So I'm fast forwarding that, and when it's mostly dry I'm going to put it right back in. I'm going to cover some of that other area, and then I'm going to add more. There's more pink in that lower left part of my craft mat, so I'm going to focus on that, and it's looking pretty good. And you keep tapping it in. You can see because I dried it the first time for that first layer, I get a totally different look. I get a lot of dots and different patterns on top of that first layer. So I'm going to dry that. And then I'm going to place my Nina panel over it to see if I got a good area that I can put behind there. And I decided there was a little bit too much white, so I'm going to try to get a little bit on there. Of course it failed, so I had to drop it back in there. And I really liked the way it came out. It added just a little bit of orange to that white area. So I'm going to dry that quickly, and I noticed I had this big puddle. So I'm just going to grab a tissue and dab it up, and it's going to leave kind of a big water stain, but I liked it. I really liked it as part of the look of this watercolor. So I'm going to quickly dry that, and that is going to be where I leave it. So I'm just going to make sure I have all my areas covered, and that is it. So I am going to take some Distress Oxide worn lipstick, the same color I used in the watercolor, and I'm going to put some splatters down. So I'm going to kind of position my top piece on top of where I'm going to cut that watercolor. You could cut it now, I'm going to cut it later. And then I'll take this flat brush, put some water on it, and dip it into this little bit of worn lipstick that I have on the craft mat. I'm going to try to get not too much water on my brush because I want my splatters to be really small and subtle. So I just did a few taps there and it turned out just fine. Now I'm going to take my Gonzai Tambi black palette. I felt like I had too much water, so I'm just going to tap my brush on my craft mat. And you can see how much water came out. Those would have been really giant splatters. So I just got some small ones with just a few taps. I'm going to mark the edges so that I can trim it out. And then I'm going to put some Scotch foam tape behind my Nina panel. And when I have an area that's too small, I just cut my Scotch foam strip right up the middle, and then I'll split it between one side and the other. So I'm going to cover the whole back of this panel so that it pops up onto my watercolor. Now, when I did this, I forgot to put a piece under the flower, so it's kind of sagging in the middle of that flower. Now, I also made this mistake the first time, and so what I did was I just did the same thing as I'm doing here, and I just cut a small piece of a Stampin' Up! Dimensional, and I lifted it up and put it right there underneath. Now, the first time I did it, it slid right under and everything was fine, but somehow when I was pulling my tweezers away, it came out a little bit. So I tried to get it off, but it's really hard to get off. These are sticky. So what I ended up doing was just kind of smushing it in there and pressing it down, and it worked great. So that's how I lifted up that middle part. Now I'm going to put some ATG tape runner on the back of this panel and adhere it to my card base. And now I'm going to take that stamen and color just the tip of it with a black Stampin' Up! Marker. I wanted to add a little bit more black to go with the splatters and also my sentiment. For the birthday part of my sentiment, I am going to just use the bottom half. So what I'm going to do is hang my stamp off the top of my paper so that only the birthday stamps on my cardstock here. So you kind of have to look closely, but it works pretty well. So as I lift this up, you can see I just have the birthday part, and I just trim that out. I'm going to put some two-way glue on the back of that and adhere it to the card. And then I'm going to take the Happy that I cut from that die set by Simon Says Stamp, put some two-way glue, and place it right over it. And I overlapped them just a little bit so the Happy was on top of the birthday. And you can move, because it's so thin, you can move it around a little bit so that it's between the letters. So I'm going to make sure that that's all pressed down. To tone down the black on my stamen a little bit, I'm going to add some dots with my white gel pen. I'm still using the pen that is dry, so my dots don't look very good, but I really like how they made the black not stand out so much. I'm going to use a glue dot. This is 1/8 of an inch, and I'm going to put it right at the bottom here, and then I'll place it right in the middle of this hibiscus. And that's because it's going to be hard to glue that down to this intricate die. And that is the card for today. At first I colored that stamen pink and it did not look good at all, so I went with white and a black tip. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.